Akka, we are good to go.
Mom, you're mute.
Apologies. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll start again at the beginning. My heartfelt thanks to the organizers of Tattwaloka, in particular Mrs. Sharala Panchapakeshan and Mrs. Vasumati, and to my two good friends who have been doing all the technical assistance, Shreya Nagarajan Singh and Ramak Sagar. Thank you all so much. So last week we had part 1 of this series, and today we are having the second part. I'll do a very brief recap just for a few minutes for those of you who hadn't attended the last session. A very brief one. So we had spoken about the sources of history, and we spoke about coins, and what I'm showing you are some coins of the Chola period. We also spoke about inscriptions as a very important source of history. And here is a copper plate inscription from the Vijayanagara times. We learned about stone inscriptions, the scripts, the languages, and also the copper plate inscriptions. We also saw some of the beautiful sandstone pillars of Ashoka, the Mauryan king, which belonged to the 3rd century BCE. We also spoke about temple tanks, such as this one in Mannargudi, the temple town of Mannargudi, which is the largest temple tank in the whole world. We saw tanks like this, the step tank in Hampi, and the aqueducts of Hampi that carried water to the city. This is a place called Abhaneri in Rajasthan, close to Jaipur, where there is a very, very deep and exquisitely crafted step well. Modhera, the Sun Temple in Modhera, Gujarat, that also has a lovely step tank like this. And we went to Rani Ki Vav, also in Gujarat, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the best known step tank in the whole of India, where at ground level you don't see anything, and as you slowly proceed, you keep going down, down, down. That's how it is, meters below the ground. And now we are going to come to what are called Stalabrikshams. Many of you who have gone to the temples of South India, especially the temples of Tamil Nadu, would have seen a tree somewhere inside the compound. And we won't even give it a second glance. We think it's for some religious purpose and it doesn't concern us at all, and we keep walking. Sometimes you may have a plaque or a board over there that says it's the Stalabriksham of this temple, and some story connecting that particular tree. Briksham is tree in Sanskritam, Stalam is place. So the sacred tree of that place in Sanskritam is called Stalabriksham. There may be some kind of a board that gives you an explanation of how that tree is connected with the Stala Puranam or the traditional story of that particular temple. But more often than not, we hardly pay attention to that tree, but that's a mistake. We need to. For example, this is a mango tree. And we've seen mangoes in India, so we are really not very bothered when we see a mango tree inside or immediately outside a temple. But you see, the mango tree, other than the delicious fruit that we eat all the time, the mango tree has very many medicinal properties. And before I go into some of the trees in particular, I want to tell all of you, and again, I want to say, like I said last time, that these lectures have been structured for young students. It's very nice that many others have also joined, parents, teachers, friends, etc. But I am now speaking to a young audience, students. So, in ancient times and in medieval times, and even now we know, but we are not doing anything about it, we understand that many trees have medicinal value. And these trees have been for centuries and centuries used by traditional practitioners of medicine like Ayurveda for making their medicines. Even now, doctors following the traditional practice of medicine make lots of their medicines from the trees, the bark, the roots, the fruits, the seeds, leaves, etc. So these trees have huge medicinal properties other than various other benefits like letting out oxygen, etc. And therefore our ancients decided that the forests of these trees would be labeled sacred groves, and that at least one particular specimen of that tree would be inside the temple premises as a sacred tree, Stalabriksham, so that it would be very, very safe. If it's inside the temple complex, it's very safe. And many a shrine, many a temple had been built in the middle of a sacred grove. So, take for example, a very famous temple, the one of Meenakshi Sundareshwarar in the ancient and hoary city of Madurai. There is a song by Muthuswami Dikshithar, said, Kadamba Vana Nilaye. So Kadamba Vana, she was in a forest of Kadamba trees. Now we go to the mango here, Ma in Tamil, and in Sanskritam it's Amra. I have taken all this information from a wonderful book published by the C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer Foundation. I must acknowledge it. So many parts of trees of this mango tree have been used in traditional medicine. You can all read it over here. Dried powder of the tender leaves are given for diarrhea and sugar complaints. A decoction of the leaves and barks causes shrinking of tissues and arrests bleeding. In North India, a beverage is made from roasted unripe fruits and used as a cure for sunstroke. And the mango tree is a Stalabriksham in many Shiva and Vishnu temples, also associated with Buddhists and Jains and used in many religious functions. So that's with the mango tree, and that is the sacred tree of the Ekamaranatha temple in Kanchipuram. Very famous mango tree is there. Now we go to a place called Thiruvalangadu. For those of you who know Tamil, you can easily understand the meaning of this name. But for those who don't, let me explain. Thiru in Tamil is sacred. Alam is the banyan tree. Kadu is a forest. Thiru Alam Kadu together becomes Thiruvalangadu. And this is a place which is about 2 hours.
Mom, voice is breaking a lot.
Oh, my voice is breaking.
No, ma'am.
No,
it's quite audible.
Akka.
It's quite
I
audible.
know, ma'am, it is audible.
Not really. It's you're fine.
I'm fine? Oh,
Yeah, you're fine. Quite clear.
thank you
It's
so much.
okay. It's okay, no problem.
Thank you so much. So we go, this Thiruvalangadu is a very ancient place, which is about 2 hours drive from Chennai, approximately near Arakonam. And Thiruvalangadu has a temple for Shiva. And the Shiva there, interestingly, is called Vataranyeshwara. Vata in Sanskritam is banyan, Aranya is forest, Ishwara is God. So Vataranyeshwara is the god Shiva of the Vata Aranya, of the forest of banyan trees. Same thing as Thiruvalangadu in Tamil, Vataranya in Sanskritam, and Vataranyeshwara is the name of that god. Now, what is very interesting about this temple is that I know digressing a little from Stalabriksham, but it is very appropriate that I say this here. The Shiva in this temple resides in Thiruvalangadu, resides in one of the Panchastalam, that is one of the 5 places where Shiva is known to dance. And the number 1 among these 5 places is the Kanakasabha or the Chittambalam in Chidambaram. There Shiva is Nataraja. It's a Nataraja temple. We know of that well. The second place where Nataraja dances is the Rajata Sabha, which is the Meenakshi Sundareshwara Temple in Madurai, which is also called the Velli Ambalam. Velli in Tamil is silver and Rajata is in Sanskritam silver. Then we go to Thiruvalangadu over here, which is called the Ratna Sabha or the Hall of Gems. Here also it's a home of Nataraja. Then we go to the Tamra Sabha, the Hall of Copper in Tirunelveli, which is the Nelliyappar Kantimati temple, famous one. Finally, we have the Chithra Sabha. This is the Hall of Paintings. Again, a very important place for Nataraja, that is in Kutralam. So, Thiru Alam Kadu, this was once a dense forest of banyan trees. The banyan tree is still the Stalabriksham of this temple, but very little, I'm afraid, of this forest, this Vataranyam or this Alankadu is left in this town. And this is true of almost all the places which are known to be, where temples are known to be in sacred groves. Almost all of it has unfortunately gone. Our ancients, for a purpose, demarcated that area as sacred. They gave it the tag, not only because it was really sacred, there was a religious association, but also because these trees, whether it is Amra or whether it is Bata, whichever tree, they have a lot of medicinal properties, need to be safeguarded for the sake of making medicines, among various other uses and purposes. So here is the sad state of the Vata Aranya in Thiruvalangadu. We have very little left, I'm afraid. This is what it looks. And we now go to the Kapaleshwara Temple in the heart of Chennai. I understand that many of you in this audience are from Chennai, so something from here. Other than the main sanctum of Kapaleshwara and his consort Parvati, called Karpagambal in this temple, there is a small shrine as you come in a clockwise direction in Pradakshina of this temple. And there you will see a board called Pune Vananathar. Then inside the small shrine, there is a Shivalinga. This is it, the small shrine. Punai is this tree over here. It's the Punai Maram. I'll go back to the previous slide. Punai is the tree. Vana is forest. Natha is God. So Punai Vananathar is here. Now, why is he called Punai Vananathar? Vanam is forest. So, Punai Vanam, there was a huge forest of Punai trees, obviously, somewhere in this area at one point of time. And this is God Shiva of the Punai Vanam. And therefore, he is called Punai Vananathar. That Punai Vanam is nowhere to be seen. We won't even know about it, but for the name over here, which is a dead giveaway, saying that there was a Punai forest over here. But the Stalabriksham of this temple, this Kapaleshwara temple in Mylapore in Chennai, is the Punai Maram, and there it is over here. And this sanctum is immediately underneath that tree. Now, some of my friends who work in an NGO called Niral that does very good work for saving trees and protecting trees in Chennai told me this, and I need to acknowledge where I got this information from. So my friends in Niral told me that this Punai tree has the capacity of growing very near the seashore. You see, there are many trees and plants that will not survive when there is salt breeze. And near the seashore, you have nothing but salt air. So our ancients were wise enough to understand that they had to have a Stalavriksham, which was very important for medicinal purposes and as a tree that would withstand the salt-laden wind breeze. And obviously, this kind of tree grew in abundance over there. We must also understand that the present Kapaleshwara temple in Mylapore in Chennai is not in its original location. The original site of this temple was somewhere near the seashore. And at a later point of time, for various reasons, it was relocated to where it is today. And therefore, in that original place near the seashore, there must have been a forest of Punai trees. And a particular tree was selected as the Stalavriksham of the tree, of that temple. And when it was relocated to its present premises also, maybe there was a vanam, a forest of Punai trees. And now inside this temple, there is this one solitary Punai tree, Punai Maram, Punai tree. The Punai Vanam, the forest, is sadly not to be seen. So this is the Punai tree. And this has been associated with, again, I've taken it from this book, Sacred Trees, published by the C.P. Ramsameyer Foundation. It is this flower of this Pune tree is one of the 8 flowers offered to this deity, Shiva, during early morning worship. That's the religious aspect. Medicinal uses, just see how many there are. The leaf extract is used to soothe sore eyes and as a snuff to relieve giddiness and headache. The juice of the bark is given internally to stop profuse internal and external bleeding. The Punai flowers are used to treat nervous disorders, paralysis, and to reduce body temperature. The oil extracted from the seed kernel is used to relieve pain and leprosy and as a remedy for pain in the joints and muscles, ulcers, and skin diseases. So you see how much one tree can give us. We've seen the mango, we've seen the Punai tree. This is the Ekamaranatha temple in Kanchipuram, very, very famous temple where the Amra, the mango tree, is the sacred tree. It is very clearly associated with God Shiva and Goddess Parvati in this temple. I won't go into the details. The religious aspect plus the medicinal aspect made the sacred groves and they make the sacred tree that important. We have forgotten that purpose altogether, and we are the poorer for it, for destroying all these forests that had these medicinal trees. Okay, so that is to do with the Stalabrikshams. We now go to another topic altogether, and we are now going to talk about education. Many of you who are looking at the screen will clearly understand that this is Nalanda, the ruins of the great center of learning in present-day Bihar in India. So Nalanda University was started approximately in the 5th century AD, 5th century AD, during the period of the Gupta kings, the famous Gupta kings of North India. And it was basically a Buddhist monastery, but many other subjects were taught over here. Huge number of subjects were taught over here. And you would have all studied in your textbooks that people from all over India and from various other parts of the world, from China, from various other countries, Sri Lanka, etc., thronged to this university to study. There were very strict rules of admission, very strict rules. They had to pass a tough exam to get into this university because the standard of education was so high. There were 3 libraries. We get to know a lot of information from Buddhist manuscripts and other sources about this Nalanda University. 3 libraries, huge libraries were there. They were called Ratna Sagar, Ratnodadi, and Ratna Ranjak. Look at the beautiful names. Ratna is gem. Ratna Sagar means an ocean of gems, sea of gems. Ratna Odadi means an ocean of gems. Ratna Ranjak means a collection of gems. What are these gems? These gems were the manuscripts that were stored in them. Ayurvedic manuscripts, Buddhist manuscripts, Hindu manuscripts. So many precious manuscripts were stored in 3 huge libraries on the campus. So many teachers, so many students. We could go on and on about Nalanda. We also understand that a famous Chinese Buddhist pilgrim of the 7th century. Can I request all of you to mute yourselves, please? There's a lot of disturbance. So Huyen Tsang came all the way to China to study in this university. He collected a whole lot of manuscripts to enhance his learning and to take back to China. But not many people will tell you, okay, this is Vikramishila. Not many people will tell you that this Huyen Tsang, who is very famous, great scholar, did a lot for Buddhist learning. We know he came in the reign of King Harshavardhana, very famous king of North India. We know that he studied in the Nalanda University, but hardly any history textbook, either at the school level or the college level, will tell you that this Huyen Tsang came all the way to South India. He stayed in South India for many years, especially in a place called Kanchipuram. The Kanchipuram that is 75 kilometers from Chennai, and which is very well known today as a town of temples and as a center of silk weaving. Why did Huyen Tsang come all the way to Kanchipuram? And the reason is because this Kanchi of ancient times was a very great center of learning. It didn't have one particular campus like Nalanda University or like Vikramashila or Takshashila, all the great universities we learn about in North India. Maybe it wasn't like that. There wasn't one structure inside one campus, but it was a very, very great center of Buddhist learning, Vedic learning, and Jain learning. We had all of this in Kanchipuram. We have enough and more reference for that. And this Huin Sang, who is so famous, came all the way to Kanchipuram. He stayed here for several years to learn Buddhism. All right. So this is a little known fact, and I'd like all of you to know about it. Now, what the temple that you are seeing in this photograph is a Pallava era 8th century temple called the Kailasanatha Temple. Today it's called the Kailasanatha Temple. The ancient name was Rajasimheshwara, since it was constructed in the reign of King Rajasimha and almost completely built of sandstone. Now this temple has a small mantapa inside. We'll come to that later. Now, I am not digressing from the main topic of Kanchipuram being a center of learning. I am getting there, but bear with me and watch this map. Look at this map. There was a dynasty called the Kadamba Dynasty. Not many people know about it. Kadamba Dynasty had its capital in a place called Vaijayanti. And this is the approximate area of the Kadamba Dynasty. It's like this, Karnataka area. And what is very, very important is, I'm just skipping a few things. In Shimoga district, there is a small temple called the Panaveswara Temple. In front of the temple, you have a pillar like this, which has a very, very important inscription. It's in Sanskrit, this inscription. And it tells us some extremely interesting and extremely important information about the person who started this dynasty. His name was Mayura Sharma. He was a Brahmin. And this inscription tells us, this Mayura Sharman, along with his guru, his teacher, Veera Sharman, came all the way to Kanchipuram. He was not a king at that time. Mayura Sharman was not. He was a student of Vedic learning. And he comes all the way from that area in Karnataka to Kanchipuram to study in an institution called the Ghatika. The Ghatika was a center of higher learning in Vedic studies. So Mayura Sharman and teacher Veera Sharman come all the way to Kanchipuram to study in this Ghatika. Unfortunately, what happens is there is a kind of a skirmish, some kind of misunderstanding between some Pallava soldiers possibly and Mayura Sharman. And he goes back all the way and with a vow, with an oath to start a kingdom of his own and to fight against the Pallavas. But all that we need not go into. Just to say, because of this inscription, we understand that Mayura Sharman from far away Karnataka came all the way to the Tamil country, to Kanchipuram, to study in an institution called the Ghatika. And this Kailasanath, that was around the 4th century AD. That was around the 4th century AD. Much, much later, in the 8th century AD, oh, just give me a second, please. Much later, in the 8th century, sorry, just give me a second. In the 8th century AD, this Kailasanatha temple about which I told you came to be built. The Ghatika continued to function in Kanchipuram. But a very, very great historian named Dr. C. Meenakshi has suggested that after this temple, this Pallava Kailasanatha temple was constructed in the 8th century, it is likely that the place where the Ghatika functioned was inside the premises of the Kailasanatha temple. Anyway, Kanchipuram is also known to be a Buddhist center because, Huin Sang tells us that. And it was also a very great Jaina center of learning. We know that because there is an inscription and other sources as well. Now, where are we going? We are going from Kanchipuram to a place called Inairam, which is near Vijupuram. And this was the state of that temple. And it's now like this. It is under the control of the Archaeological Survey of India, maintained beautifully today. The reason I'm showing you this temple is because, and I'm not going to give you a whole lot of details and bore you, but just to tell you that in the Chola times of the 11th century AD, in the time of Rajendra Chola, this temple, which was for Narasimha, was a very, very great center of learning. That inscription that is on the wall of this temple tells you the number of students who studied here, the number of teachers who were here, how many students for each subject, the Vedas and other allied scriptures that were taught here, how many students for each subject, how many teachers for each subject, the salary that was paid to the teacher, the kind of fellowship stipend that the students had. So many details are given. So we understand that these temples were not just places of worship, they also were centers of learning. And now we are going to a place called Tribunai. This is the Varadaraja Perumal temple, still functioning. And this also is a Chola era temple. There is an inscription here of Rajadiraja Chola, the son and successor of Rajendra Chola. And again, it talks about this temple being a center of Vedic learning. Same details, students, teachers, etc., etc., etc. All kinds of details are given. Then so many inscriptions on the walls of this temple. This is near Pondicherry. All right. Now we come to a very important place called Mukuden. In Tamil, the word Mukuden means Thiru sacred, Mu 3, Kudal is like a place of joining, like Sangama. So this is a place where 3 rivers joined, the Palar and her tributaries, the Cheyyar and the Vegavati. Must have been a very, very scenic place where it is the Sangamam of 3 rivers. Once upon a time, rivers that had water. There is no water there now. And very close to this place where the 3 rivers joined, the Pallavas built a temple. And now this temple is called the Upton Venkatesha Perumal Temple. And this place, this Gramam, this village is called Mukuden. Fine. Now, why are we talking about it in the context of education? Because though the Pallavas built this temple, when the Cholas later came to power in this area, oh, and I forgot to tell you, this temple is en route from Chengalpet to Kanchipuram, in case you want to go in Tamil Nadu. This temple is also under the control of the Archaeological Survey of India, very beautifully maintained, still in active worship. So the inscription here tells you, again of the 11th century, the inscription belongs to the time of the 3rd son, Veera Rajendra of Rajendra Chola, the 3rd son of Rajendra Chola. It's one of the longest Tamil inscriptions ever. Mentions once again a college being run on the premises. Again, number of teachers, number of students. What is even more interesting is that it says there was a hostel attached to this college where the students could stay. And the facilities that were given to the students in this hostel. And what if the teachers or the students that lived here fell ill? So there was a hospital. What was the name of the hospital? Veerachoran. And did the hospital have many doctors? 2 are mentioned. One a physician and one a surgeon. The name of one was Ashwathaman Bhattan. What do hospitals need? Medicine. So what kind of medicine was stored here? Ayurvedic medicine. And the names of so many 30 plus Ayurvedic medicines are mentioned in this inscription. And these medicines are used by practitioners of Ayurveda even today. Clearly the names are given in the inscription, in the Tamil script of the Chola times. And what if the person had an injury in the head? So there was a barber. And there were 2 assistants who would be sent out to collect herbs for making medicine and to bring them to this hospital. All these, I'm just giving it to you in a nutshell. Much more is given in this inscription. So we understand that many of these temples were also centers of education. They had hospitals, they had hostels, etc., etc. We go to the famous Ranganatha Swami temple on the island of Srirangam. This is the main Gopuram leading into the temple today. Give me a second. Why I'm showing you this is because there is an inscription in this temple that mentions that there was a library inside. Now, why would you have a library? Because it was also a center of learning. Otherwise, no need for a library. Here also, there was a Vedic college. All ancillary scriptures must have also been taught over here by teachers, and the library was here. And the library, it says, the inscription says, interestingly, had images and worship of goddess Saraswati, clearly understandable, God Hayagriva, the Vaishnavite god of learning, wisdom, and Veda Vyasa. So all these deities were worshipped in the library, quite rightly so. So that's to do with education. Let's learn a little bit about Buddhist structures. So here we are going to a place called Sanchi in Madhya Pradesh, where it was a place that was very, very important to the Buddhists. And today we have numerous monuments in Sanchi, some of which are called the stupas. A stupa, as many of you may know, is a Buddhist monument. This is a small stupa in Sanchi, there's a hemispherical shape, and inside which would be kept very safely the mortal remains, a bone or a tooth or some other relic of either the Buddha or some of the great acharyas, teachers of Buddhism. So this is stupa number 2 in Sanchi, and the compound wall is called a Vedika. Very beautiful compound wall full of sculptures. So this is stupa 2, and these are the sculptures that you have on the Vedika. Now here is something very, very interesting, and I would like to acknowledge that I have scanned this photograph from a book called Art of Ancient India by Susan Huntington. Now the pillars of this Vedika, as I told you, have many sculptures. One sculpture, just look at this, is a pillar. Those of you who attended the previous lecture will understand what I'm saying. The pillar, I'll try to zoom. The pillar is an Ashokan pillar, which has the 4-lion capital and a chakra above it. So we understand that this tall pillar with the 4-lion capital and the chakra above it is from Sanchi, the place where the Buddha gave his first lecture. The deer park in Sanchi is very famous, very, very important, very sacred to the Buddhists. So that pillar was kept in Sarnath, in Sarnath by Ashoka, and Sarnath, not Sanchi, sorry, and Sarnath by Ashoka. And here is the top, which unfortunately was damaged when the pillar broke and the capital fell down. All right. So this is the Mahastupa in Sanchi, which has a huge, huge stupa, originally constructed in the time of King Ashoka, the Mauryan king in the 3rd century BC, and later it was damaged, and the Shunga kings who subsequently came contributed to this. Now you have the triple umbrella right on top. It's a famous symbol of Buddhism, and some scholars have interpreted it to be the Buddha Dharma, and the Buddha Sangha. We often say Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami, the 3 very important components, principles, the core of Buddhism. So it is possible that the triple umbrella represents all of these. So what is really, really important about this Mahastupa and Sanchi, other than the sheer size and it's so magnificent, is that there are 2 Vedikas, one at the ground level and one slightly above. This is how it looks. 2 pradakshinas. You can do a pradakshina at the ground level. You can do a pradakshina there also, circumambulation, and the 4 toranas. Like we have gopurams as the entrance gateways to many of the temples in South India, especially Tamil Nadu, here as gateways. See, when we think of torana, we generally think of something festive in flowers or in mango leaves, etc. Torana in Sanskritam just means decoration. So these are decorative gateways in the 4 cardinal directions of this stupa. Extremely, extremely well carved pillars. This is how it looks. Unfortunately, some are broken. Let me try to zoom. So here you have the minutest carvings showing you some Buddhist stupas, stories from what we call the Jataka tales, which chronicle the previous lives, the previous janmas of the Buddha. Now just look at this. Look at the carvings over here. Now among the 4 Toranas, an inscription tells you that the southernmost Torana was made by, and listen to this, it's so interesting, it was made by ivory carvers. That is, people who were used to carving on ivory were commissioned to carve on these Toranas. Because you see, ivory carvers have to work very, very carefully. Their work is extremely intricate. You would have seen carving on ivory in museums, etc. So that kind of intricacy and that attention to detail was brought into the sculptures of this Torana. And here is a stupa, here is a stupa, here is a stupa, here is the Buddha Dharma Chakra, not the Ashoka Chakra. This is the Buddha Dharma Chakra being worshipped. Many, many stories from the Jatakas, etc., etc. So this is how the Toranas of Sanchi look. Exquisite, exquisite pieces of art. These are. And many postage stamps also have this. All right. Now, this is a place called Bharhat in Madhya Pradesh, which originally had a Buddhist stupa, completely broke. And in the British times, many of the pieces were taken to the museum in Kolkata of today. So here is the Vedika, or the compound wall of that stupa that is no more in Bharhat. What is very interesting is these vertical pillars have round sculptures. Now let us look at what is there in these sculptures. So here is a lady lying down on a cot and 3 other ladies around her. One is holding a fly whisk, which means this lady must be of some importance. Yes, the very important lady. What is shown here, the lady shown here is Maya Devi, wife of King Shuddhodhana. Their son was to be Gautama, Siddhartha, who was later hailed all over the world as Buddha. So there is a white elephant, there is an elephant shown over here. And because we already know the story, we'll understand that this is a white elephant. Maya Devi had a dream that a white elephant entered her womb. And then later she gave birth to Siddhartha. It was supposed to be a very, very good omen. And here, look at this. This is a wonderful small area. They have put in so many sculptures. So there is a tree here and there's a tree here. There's a monkey lying horizontal. He is catching hold of a branch of this tree. He's tied his tail. Very clearly, he's tied his tail to a branch of that tree. This is actually a river in between. This is a leader monkey acting as a bridge for all his other monkeys to jump over him and go to the other side so that they could be safe from the army of a king who was hunting in that forest. They said that all the monkeys jumped from this tree onto the back of that monkey and on the other side and escaped to safety. And a very bad monkey finally jumped on the back of the brave leader monkey, broke his back, and then went to the other side. And the dying leader monkey was picked up by the king, and he gave a long lecture, and then the monkey died. The monkey gave the lecture, and then he died. So this monkey, having done this very good deed and then having died, was Buddha in one of his previous births. So that is also one of the Jataka tales that is given on the sculpture of the Bharhat Stupa. Now here, above the sculpture, just give me a second. Above the sculpture, you have an inscription that is also in the Brahmi script, about which we spoke at length last time. Quickly, let us go to Maharashtra. We are jumping from place to place today. In Maharashtra, we are going to a place called Ajanta, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this is a horseshoe-shaped ravine. And the Buddhists, as early as the 2nd century BC or even earlier, chose Ajanta as a place where they could dwell far away from the crowds where they could meditate. And slowly, so this is how the river Vagora is, that has cut down into the rock for millions and millions of years. And all these green things that are protruding into the black area are the caves of Ajanta, approximately 28 or 30 in number. These are the caves. Now, these have been cut before the time of missionary tools, etc., deep into the rock for the Buddhists over here to pray and for the Buddhists over here to live in. So let me quickly show you some diagrams. Again, this is scanned from a book called Art of Ancient India by Susan Huntington. I am showing you what are called the Viharas. There are two types of structures in Ajanta. They are called the Viharas and the Chaityas. The Viharas are the place where the Buddhist monks lived, and the Chaityas were the places where they prayed. So there are far more Viharas than Chaityas. There are few Chaityas, many Viharas. So the Vihara is like all the black portion that you are seeing is actually the rock. And the white portion that you see is where the architects have cut through. The black dots are the pillars. Okay, so this is how deep into the hard rock they have been cut. These are the Chaityas. The places of worship, generally horseshoe shaped. The big black portion that you see inside is a stupa. I will show that to you. Now just look at this. I mean, this is simply understanding. However many times you see photographs of the caves of Ajanta, however many times you may go to Ajanta, you will have to pause in wonderment how these people, and they work from the approximately 2nd century BC down to the 5th century AD. These caves were made in the time of the kings of the Satavahana dynasty, and many more were made during the time of the kings of the Vakataka dynasty. Great architects, great sculptures. Hardly do we know their names. They didn't bother. They just left behind great works of architecture and sculpture. So imagine this rock is all the architect and the sculptor would have seen. And then they cut in, little by little, all these pillars, the 4 pillars that you see in the facade, the outermost portion, have not been made elsewhere and brought here. No, these are all part of the living rock. And they are identical. You can go measure. They are absolutely identical. No difference in pattern, no difference in shape, perfectly symmetrical. So this is how the caves look. And when you go into the Chaityas, everything, needless to say, everything is one piece of stone, completely one piece of stone. So I've already explained to you what a stupa is from Sanchi. A relic of the Buddha or one of the acharyas is kept, and then a big hemispherical structure is built over it, and then it is worshipped by Buddhists. Here, this is also a stupa, no doubt, but this is made of one piece of stone. It's part of the living rock, as I mentioned earlier. So there is no possibility of keeping a relic inside. It's just a stupa with the figure of the Buddha, and the Buddhists used to go round and round it in pradakshina. So there is place for going around it, the place for going around the pillars also. So this is how Chaitya looks in Ajanta. Look at the top portion. Look at this. Why did they make all these lines over here? You know, they look like our ribs. Why so many things there? So you see, this is basically to make it look like wood. Prior to these Buddhist Chaityas being made of stone, as in the case of Ajanta, they were made of wood. And these architects and sculptors who were creating these caves of Ajanta remembered that tradition when they were making of wood, of timber, and they incorporated that pattern of having wooden beams on top, and they made it like this. Even if we don't understand what they were trying to do, when you look up at a Chaitya in Ajanta, it looks so beautiful. So this is, can you see the space where the Buddhists could actually circumambulate? They could go around. Now all this is in Ajanta. Oh, this place has a wonderful, in one of the caves, there is a wonderful sculpture of Buddha in Parinirvana. We all know that Buddha was enlightened. When he sat under the Bodhi tree and meditated, he got enlightened, and that's why he's called the Buddha, the enlightened one. But Parinirvana is when he shed his mortal body and attained complete liberation, nirvana. So this sculpture they have made, I'll go back to the previous slide here. Very difficult to take a photograph of the entire sculpture of the Buddha because it is so long and the space around is very narrow. So again, I have scanned this from Susan Huntington's book, and it was taken in 3 parts and stitched together. So this is 7 meters long. Can you believe it? And look at the talent of the sculptor who made this. Look at the face of the Buddha. It's as though he's actually sleeping. So peaceful. And these are all his devotees. Many of the sculptures in Ajanta still have traces of paintings on them. We all know that this place is very, very famous. The paintings of Ajanta are world famous. They are made according to a technique called fresco. The fresco technique is when the artist used to paint when the surface was still wet. It's a huge, very difficult technique, and the artists of Ajanta actually mastered it. So this is Lokeshwara, one of the deities of Buddhism. Just give me a second. Show you some of the paintings. Very, very lifelike. They are from various Jatakas also. Look at Buddha over here. Look at the bolster, the cushion which he is resting on. Even the design on the cushion, you can still see today. Look at this lady. Look at the jewels she's wearing. Look at the garment she's wearing. There are duck motifs. This is some kind of a print that she has on what she's wearing. Look at the jewels of this lady. So many details you can observe in the paintings of Ajanta. A lady looking at herself in the mirror, and this necklace that she is wearing must be pearls. They're shining even today. We are coming back to the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram. We are going from topic to topic to topic, none of which is connected as far as this lecture is concerned. So we are coming to the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram. Many of you may have gone there, and many of you may not have. Now, this is the entrance to the temple. Now, generally, an entrance to a South Indian temple, especially a temple in Tamil Nadu, will have a gopuram. When people pass through this doorway, they seldom realize that this is a gopuram. Very rarely, because it is so insignificant. When generally when you see a gopuram, this is the Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple, we think of this as a gopuram. So I'm going back to the one in the Kailasanatha temple. It is from this very insignificant, inconspicuous structure early in the Pallava times. This is 8th century Pallava. Gopurams were there earlier also, we know. There is one in the Shore temple in Mahabalipuram. So from these very, very small structures, over the next few centuries, it goes to become like this. This is in the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur. This also. And these are the 2 gopurams. They are not too tall, but they look like gopurams. And then slowly, I'm not giving you all the details. Slowly they become like this. This is in the Vijayanagara times. And then the Nayak times, who were the successors of Vijayanagara. This is in the Madurai Meenakshi temple. Look at the number of sculptures that are done, that southern gopuram in the Meenakshi temple, Madurai. So the gopurams are becoming bigger and bigger, more and more beautifully decorated. And it's a huge evolution of the gopura concept. Kailasanatha temple also has some very beautiful sculptures. Now this very clearly, all of you can identify, is Narasimha fighting with the demon Hiranyakashipu. All right. This is the fighting scene. Now this also is a scene where 2 people are fighting. That one you could clearly recognize because Narasimha, face of a lion, and the person he's fighting with had to be Hiranyakashipu. Now who are these 2 people? Are they gods? Are they men? What are they fighting over? So this is very interesting. This is from a story in the Mahabharata, where Arjuna goes all the way to the Himalayas to perform penance in order to get from God Shiva a very important weapon called the Pashupata Astra. Shiva, as many of you know, has the name Pashupati. So the Astra or the weapon that he had is the Pashupata Astra. And Arjuna wanted that weapon, that Astra, to fight with the Kauravas in the battle of Kurukshetra. So he performs penance and penance. He becomes thin, he becomes emaciated. And finally, Shiva decides to give him that weapon. So Shiva comes all the way to the place in the Himalayas where Arjuna is performing penance and decides to test him. So what Shiva does is he sends a wild boar towards Arjuna. And as Arjuna is going to shoot an arrow at the boar, Shiva shoots an arrow at the same time. And both of them start fighting as to who killed the boar first. Now, if you look at this sculpture, if you want to know who it is, you will have to look at all the details. Give me a second, let me zoom. So here, behind, can you see, I don't have the full photographs because this is in a niche and very difficult to take a full photograph. Do you see the hind part of a boar? So these sculptors wanted to depict Shiva. This is God Shiva who comes as a hunter. This is Arjuna shown with a crown to show that he's a Pandava prince, just to show that. And the wild boar over here to show that this is the fight between Shiva and Arjuna. Of course, Shiva won that fight and Arjuna realized it was Shiva, and then the Pashupata Astra was handed over to him. That's the story. Now, it's given it's portrayed in sculpture in this temple. Now, why did this artist, this sculptor, decide to put in a sculpture of this little known story in the Mahabharata? I mean, why there are so many stories in the Mahabharata? Why did he decide to put in this fight of Arjuna and Shiva? For what reason? Reason is because there was a very, very great scholar called Bharavi who lived in the Pallava times. And Bharavi wrote a wonderful work called the Kiratarjuniyam. Kirata means hunter. Kiratarjuniyam is the story of the Kirata, that is Shiva as a hunter and Arjuna. Bharavi took that little story from the Mahabharata and made it into a beautiful work in Sanskritam. And therefore, in the Pallava times, Bharavi's work was so famous that it was the concept of it was made into a sculpture. So that is the link over there. Just going to show you, before I wind up with another 5 minutes, just going to show you some of the beautiful, beautiful bronze images that are there in Tamil Nadu. Now, these are generally made either of copper, and when they are made of copper, the inscriptions call them Cheppu Tirumeni. Cheppu is copper in Tamil, Meni is body, Tirumeni is sacred body. So the sacred body of God made of copper is Cheppu Tirumeni. Some of these images were made of pure gold. Inscriptions tell us that. Some of these inscriptions, the sculptures, were made of gold. Some of these sculptures were made of silver. Some of these sculptures were made of Panchaloha, 5 metals, gold, silver, copper, tin, and lead. Panchaloha is very famous. So this is bronze of Shiva marrying Parvati, and this is called Kalyana Sundara. Vishnu is over here because we know that Parvati is his sister and he gave her in marriage to Shiva, and this is Parvati's attendant. Now these sculptures, bronze sculptures in India, starting from the Indus Saraswati times, were made of a technique called lost wax. So any metal image that you see like this was originally, remember, made of wax. And then there was, I'm putting this again in a nutshell, a coating of a clayey soil was put on the wax and it was heated. So when heated, wax melts. So the wax used to melt and come out of certain tubes or holes made in the clay. All the wax would come out. So what you would have is the empty clay mold. Since all the wax has melted and come out, it's called the lost wax process. And into that empty clay mold, after all the wax has come out, the molten metal, whichever metal it is that you wanted, was poured in. And once that molten metal became solidified, the clay mold was removed. And then you would have images like this. The finer work was done. And after it was taken to a temple, the very, very final stage was, see, even when it was completed, the eyes would be there, but the pupil of the eye would not be there. The final stage after it was taken into a temple is called the opening of the eye ceremony. Netron Milanam. Netra is eye, Unmilanam is to open. Netron Milanam, Chakshu Unmilanam. So these are the terms that are used, Nayanun Milanam. So the opening of the eye ceremony, meaning the pupils were actually made there. And then the god opens his eyes. Very, very important ceremony. So these are some of the outstanding bronze images. You see the front, this is Shiva, as though leaning on the bull, and Parvati next to him. Look at Shiva's head from the back. Look at that pose. So beautiful. Parvati over here. Many, many, many sculptures, bronze images. But when we see a bronze images, let us understand the difficulty into which the sculptor made while doing it. Final few slides. We think Hindu temples are confined to India? No way. So the only country that has a temple as the emblem on its flag is Cambodia. So Cambodia's flag has this temple, Angkor Wat, which was a Vishnu temple, later became a later became a Buddhist temple. And this is the image of Vishnu that was in the main sanctum and that is now kept at the entrance as you enter the temple. It's an 8-armed Vishnu. Ashtabhuja Vishnu is over here in Angkor Wat. But we also learn of many, many Ashtabhuja Vishnus in India. It's not as though it was only outside India, it was in India also. So our ancient culture was not only in India, it went to many, many, many countries of Southeast Asia. It went to Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, name it. Buddhism, Hinduism, all of it, much of temple architecture, sculpture, the script, the language, much of it went from India to very many countries. Much do we have to be proud of in India. Our ancients have left behind so much for us by way of medicine, by way of astronomy, by way of temple architecture, sculpture, literature, in various languages, various scripts, something that we need to be inordinately proud of and stand with our heads held high. And to all the youngsters in this audience, this is a message that I have given many times to many youngsters, and I'm giving it to you now. Please listen. Go on to become whatever you want, doctors and engineers, lawyers, whatever. But remember that you come from a great heritage. You have a great culture in this country. Take it forward. Be proud of it. And when you grow up, hand it to the next generation. That's my request to you. Thank you all very much. The session is now open for questions. Do ask.
Akka, we have received a question from YouTube.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you mentioned Ayurveda. Isn't Siddha the traditional school of medicine for Tamil Nadu?
Siddha, Ayurveda, that's why I said traditional schools of medicine. I mentioned Ayurveda, but repeatedly I said traditional medicine, Siddha also. Definitely.
Akka, the temples in Tamil Nadu has the Kalasham with grains. Does other temples in other states have the Kalasham with grains?
Should have, because the Kalasham has grains which are there to absorb the lightning. Generally, a temple in ancient and medieval times, it's no more the norm in modern times. No more is it followed. We have buildings much higher than a temple Gopuram or a temple Vimanam. The tallest point would have a Kalasham filled with grains that would absorb the electricity from the lightning and earth it, so that the rest of the village or the town or the city was not affected. So it's a good question. Do temples of North India also have Kalashams? Should be. It should be there.
Okay. There's another question. You have repeated many times, but please can you clarify the Ashok Chakra and Buddha Chakra?
Okay, so we generally call it the Ashoka Chakra. I don't know how and why this started. It is actually the Buddha Dharma Chakra. The chakra that you see on many of the Buddhist monuments, including the emblem of India, is the Dharma Chakra, which represents the philosophy or the teaching of the Buddha. It is there in very many Buddhist monuments, and sometimes you see that chakra flanked by deer, because it was in the deer park in Sarnath near Kashi in today's Uttar Pradesh, today's Madhya Pradesh, sorry, that Buddha preached his first sermon. And therefore, the Buddha Dharma Chakra with 2 deer are seen in many of the Buddhist monuments. I clarify, it's the Buddha Dharma Chakra.
Okay. Another question. Is there any temple in Kanchi with laughing Buddha statue?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
During the 13th to 16th centuries, what was taught in colleges and schools in India?
13th to 16th centuries in India.
Yes.
So, yeah, definitely we had institutions teaching the Vedas, ancillary grammar, logic, so many things. There is one thing that I forgot to say, and this question reminds me. We have a Chola era inscription that tells us that veterinary science was also taught in some of these schools. So, they had so many animals and they needed to be taken care of. So, veterinary science was also an important subject in ancient India. So many subjects, much of, all the Ayurveda and astronomy and the scriptures, these are the subjects that would have been taught in many of these institutions, some of which we know about, some of which we don't know about for want of sources.
Okay. There's another question. Ma'am, I've heard about a temple whose shadow never falls on the ground. Which temple is it?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. So the temple whose shadow is said never to fall on the ground is the one that I'm showing you in this picture. The famous Brihadishwara Temple in Tanjavur, which is a UNESCO World Heritage structure today. Now, just tell me one thing. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And even if I keep a small water bottle on the ground, the shadow is bound to fall. How can the shadow of something going up 60.96 meters, not feet, 0.96 meters, not have its shadow on the ground? The shadow does fall. And unfortunately, in many books, in many websites, in many articles, people have said that the shadow does not fall. The shadow falls. You can go there and you can see it. Clearly, the shadow of this Vimanam, that is the main structure above the place of worship, the shadow does fall. Another mistake that people generally make is that the tall, that structure right on top over there, this one, the Shikara, that is made of one piece of stone. Many people believe that, and they believe that a very, very long ramp for many kilometers was erected and that one stone was pushed up by elephants, etc., etc. That is totally wrong. It is not one piece of stone. It's not one piece of stone weighing some 70, 80 tons, as people have said. It is many pieces of stone taken up there, put together, and it looks like one piece of stone when you see it from ground level. That's all. It is not one piece of stone. I wish to clarify that.
Okay. Akka, can you tell the name of any famous sculptor who carved the temples in Tamil Nadu?
See, There are some inscriptions that give us the name of a few sculptors. Even the architect of this temple was Rajarajan Perunthachan. That was the name. Offhand, I'm not able to think of the name of a particular sculptor in Tamil Nadu, but stray inscriptions, very few inscriptions give us that. Even the names of very few architects are available to us even throughout India. In the Hoysala temples in Karnataka, the names of architects and sculptors are given, Mallanna, etc., etc. Here in Tamil Nadu, the rest of India itself, very, very few names are there. Very few.
In Kanchipuram, are there remains of the libraries or learning institutions that were there?
Unfortunately, no. We don't have anything. Like I said, Kanchipuram would never have had imposing structures like were there in the Nalanda University. They at best would have studied inside the temples, inside the Buddhist centers of worship, and in the Jaina centers. So if there had been structures like they were in Nalanda, we would have easily seen them. But no, nothing like that. However, definitely, Kanchipuram was an immensely important center of learning. No doubt about it.
What is the name of the Chinese Buddhist who came to India?
Here in India, we pronounce his name as Huin Sang, but that's not the correct pronunciation. It's a Chinese pronunciation that I'm unable to get.
Okay.
Hieunttsang, 7th century Chinese Buddhist.
Okay. In the Vedic period, it was the nature which was worshipped as gods. The trees can be connected to temples.
In the sense of these sacred trees being part of temple worship?
Maybe. Gayatri Iyer, could you please unmute yourself?
I meant the same. I meant the trees which were shown as the Vriksham, Stalabriksham. Are they, the connection is because the Vedic period, the nature was the one which was worshipped as God. So is that the connection that was kept by these temples?
It's a good question. The practice of worshipping nature has been there in the Hindu tradition starting from the Vedic times. That is absolutely there. So when a tree is considered sacred, it is considered so mainly because of its connection with one deity or the other. Or just to give you an example, the Vilvam is offered to Shiva, and Tulsi is offered to Vishnu, etc., etc., etc. Added to that, the medicinal properties of these trees and plants were recognized by the ancients. The importance of nature was recognized by the wind and the sun and the moon. Yes, nature worship was there. It does continue in present day Hinduism till today.
Okay. We have received a question which is written in Tamil. Could you please unmute yourself, the one who asked in Tamil? Okay, we'll just proceed. Was there an Ashokan Stupa in Kanchipuram?
Don't mind, I can read the question. I can read Tamil. Na padichu sollatuma?
Yes, please. Very
This is from YouTube, is it?
No, this is from Zoom.
From Zoom.
Oh, okay, please read.
And it goes like this, written by Pu Ravikumar. எனக்கு ஆங்கிலத்தில் கேள்வி கேட்க தெரியாது, ஆகவே தமிழில் கேட்கிறேன். கோவில்களை பொறுத்தவரை இந்தியாவில் புத்த அடையாளங்கள் தான் மூத்தவையா? I think it means are they the more ancient ones? Yeah.
நான் தமிழ்லயே பதில் சொல்றேன். இப்போ இப்படி சொல்றேன் நான். இப்போ நம்ம இந்தியால பார்க்கிற ஸ்ட்ரக்சர்ஸ்லயே புத்திஸ்ட் ஸ்ட்ரக்சர்ஸ் பெரும்பாலும் ரொம்ப பழமையானவை, அஜந்தாலையும் மற்ற இடத்துலயும். ஆனால் என்னோட கருத்து என்னன்னா, மரத்திலேயோ இல்ல செங்கல்லையோ அதுக்கும் முன்னாடி புத்திஸ்ட் ஸ்ட்ரக்சர்ஸும் இருந்திருக்கலாம், ஹிந்து ஸ்ட்ரக்சர்ஸும் இருந்திருக்கலாம். புத்திஸ்ட் ஸ்டோன்ல கன்வெர்ட் பண்ணாங்க. The earliest Goha Kovil, the earliest cave temples in India, among the earliest, I'll correct myself, among the earliest cave temples of India are those belonging to the Buddhists. No doubt. அவங்க கட்டடக்கலையை மரத்தால பண்ணிக்கிற ஒரு காலம் ஒண்ணு உண்டு. அப்புறம் அதை கல்லால பண்ணாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் கல்லால பண்ண ஹிந்து டெம்பிள்ஸ் நம்ம பார்க்கிறோம். ஆனால் செங்கலாலேயோ மரத்தாலேயோ பண்ண ஹிந்து டெம்பிள்ஸ் அதுக்கு முன்னாடி இருந்திருக்குமா இருந்திருக்காதான்னு நம்மளுக்கு இப்போ தெரியல. நான் அப்படி சொல்றேன். ஓகே, proceed.
Yeah. I think we can have people to unmute themselves and ask questions.
Okay, go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
Can you please repeat that question and answer in English, please?
In English, okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Not at all, not at all. So his question in Tamil was, are Buddhist temples the earliest we see in India today? So my answer is yes. So there is the caves of Ajanta are among the earliest stone structures in India, among the earliest. So they are in stone. Prior to that, as I mentioned in my lecture itself, they would have been there in Buddhist structures. I repeat, today some of the earliest structures in stone are Buddhist. So they converted from the medium of wood into the medium of stone. The stone structures of the Hindus that we see today are after the Buddhist stone structures. But my perspective from which I think is, would there also have been structures made of wood or brick alongside the wooden structures, brick structures of the Buddhists at one point of time? The Buddhists converted to stone earlier, and the Hindus converted to stone after the Buddhists from the available evidence today. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Yeah. Ma'am, you said that Arjuna fought with Shiva. When they fought, which animal came to the fighting place?
Boar. B-O-A-R. The Varaha in Sanskrit.
Okay. Which is the tallest temple in India?
Very difficult question. So are we looking at the Vimanam? That is the structure above the main place of worship, or are we looking at the Gopuram, which is the entrance way? Are we looking at India on the whole, or are we looking only at the south? Can you clarify?
We are looking at we are looking at India, ma'am, and the
Okay.
Gopuram I'm asking. The Gopuram.
Gopuram, if it's Gopuram, then it's definitely South India. And if we are not we have two modern ones. One is in Karnataka. I think it's the Madhavan Temple, if I'm not mistaken, the Shiva Temple. The other one is the famous outermost southern Gopuram of the temple on the island of Srirangam, the Ranganatha Swami Temple. But let's remember, both these Gopurams, the one in Karnataka is very modern, and the base of the Srirangam Gopuram belongs to the 17th century, and the superstructure, the tall part, belongs to the 20th century. So these are South India.
Okay. Akka, where can we find the Vedic books?
What Vedic books? The Vedas?
Um,
Can the person who asked this question unmute and ask?
I mean the Vedas, like as you told that in the 3 libraries, which Vedas were found, like where are they now?
Say the 3 libraries in Nalanda University were unfortunately burnt down in the 13th century. The whole university was burnt down by an invader called Bhaktiyar Khilji. All the manuscripts were burned, all the buildings were burned. The entire university almost came to an end because the invader set fire to it. So this library was mainly a Buddhist library with Buddhist manuscripts. Vedas may have been there, perhaps, but it was mainly a Buddhist library. But it was burnt down by Bhaktiyar Khilji. Sad end to a glorious. After that, it was slightly revived, but what was gone was gone.
Akka, according to Vimanam side, which would be the tallest temple?
Vimanam, the one I'm showing you on the screen, the Brihadishwara Temple in Tanjavur in South India, and the Jagannath Temple in Puri in North India.
Okay.
In Orissa.
Okay.
I have a question on the wood used for making the idols. Was it, I mean, traditionally stipulated that only certain type of trees can be used for making those idols? And was there a difference between the way, say, Buddhist viewed it and Hinduism viewed it?
I would not know how exactly Buddhism viewed it, but as far as Hinduism is concerned, I can tell you that according to the traditional texts, the Agama Shastras, deities were allowed to be made of wood, of stucco, that is lime plaster. Actually, a painting could also be worshipped. It could be stone as well. And definitely, only certain types of wood could be used. For example, if you go to the Puri Jagannath temple, the most famous temple where the main deities are of wood. There are other temples also. When you think of wooden deities, it's Puri Jagannath. Yes, it is stipulated that only a certain type of tree can be used for making that wood, and they go deep into the forest and they get that wood. Yes, it is stipulated. And I can add to that, when temple chariots or the rathas are made, it is very clearly stated that mainly two types of wood should be used, among which one is teak, and the other one is Iluppa maram, which is Maduka in the technical term. So the Iluppa and teak are very resistant to termites, and that's why both of them have been recommended for making temple chariots.
Thank you.
Okay. Akka, there's another question. For some of the Stalabrikshams, it is claimed that some of them are 1,000 years old. Are these claims true?
It's very difficult for a tree to live on for 1,000 years. Generally, what would happen, I'm not taking away from the religious element, please forgive me. Generally, what would happen is a branch of the tree or a graft of the tree would be taken and replanted in the same place. It is, technically speaking, that very tree itself. For example, a branch of the Bodhi tree was taken to Sri Lanka and it is worshipped over there. Similarly.
Ma'am?
Yes?
Is the Brihadishwara temple in any manner like worn away or destroyed or something?
Yes, the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur was destroyed partially. It was damaged in several invasions, that at least one particular invasion in 1310, 1311 during the time of Malik Kafur in the reign of Alauddin Khilji from North India. Yeah.
Ma'am, I heard that the Nalanda University took quite a lot of time to get destroyed till the state in which it is now. So, out of which material was it made?
No, the structures of Nalanda University were made using brick mainly, stone also. But yes.
Why did he wanted to destroy the Nalanda University?
It was an invasion. It was an invasion, and the invader destroyed a center of learning. It is so sad. Precious manuscripts containing a lot of important information in so many subjects was destroyed. Unfortunate. Precious manuscripts.
He also ruled over India, right? The
Bhakti Khilji did not rule over India. No, that it's not that Khilji dynasty. That's Alauddin Khilji.
Okay, thank you.
Akka, another question.
Yeah.
The world started from early humans who found the mythology of gods and who got the idea to believe it and make temples. I think the question is, who got this idea to believe and make temples, believe the mythologies and make temples?
It's too profound a question for me to answer. I don't know about that. It's just that temples are centers of learning, huge, I mean, centers of worship. They've been there for a very long time. I really don't get this question, so I'm not able to answer it.
Okay. Another question, was there any temple inscription across India depicting about music, raga or songs?
Across India, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but definitely in Tamil Nadu, there's a place called Pudumiyamalai in Pudukkottai district, and there you have a 7th century inscription that give you a string of swaras. They call it a musical inscription. I prefer to call it an inscription on music. And those swaras were meant to be practiced on a musical instrument called the paribadini. A similar inscription is also there in a place called Thirumayam, again in Pudukkottai district around the 7th century. These inscriptions are written in the Grantha script. In other parts of India, I'm really not too sure.
Okay. Another question from YouTube. From your previous week's talk, my 12-year-old asks this question. Was it other kings who broke Ashoka's pillar in India?
We do not. We don't. I don't know the answer. I mentioned that last time.
Okay.
Was there an Ashoka Stupa in Kanchipuram? Huin Sang mentions that Kanchipuram had more than 10,000 Buddhist monks, and hints at a stupa having been there. What happened to that stupa? We don't know. Who destroyed it? Was it destroyed? Was it really there? I'm not in a position to say. I'm preempting questions.
Okay. Another question from YouTube. In which Chola inscription mentions about veterinary? Can you be more specific?
It's a 13th century inscription. Offhand, I don't remember from which temple it is. But if this person could send me an email, I have the information with me. It's from a little known temple somewhere, I think near Kumbakonam, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very Chola area, Cholanadu. So I can answer. I can give you my email ID now. Any one of you who wants to ask questions at a later points of time can also write to me if you're interested. It's DR, D for dog, R for rat, CHITHRA@gmail.com.
So that we can take it from that.
You can write to me at this address.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome. All right, are we done?
I had a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so you mentioned like you sort of briefly passed through a dynasty called the Kadamba Dynasty.
Yes.
Do you have any more information about the dynasty?
Yeah. So this was in Karnataka, and the person who started it was Mayura Sharman. As I told you, came to the Pallava country to study the Vedas and had some kind of a quarrel with the Pallava soldiers, went back with an aim of creating his own kingdom. And Mayura Sharman, the Sharma suffix indicates that he was a Brahmin, but he took to the profession of a Kshatriya. And if we look at the inscription that I showed you, the names of his successors are given, and all of them have the suffix Varman. So Sharman is the suffix of a Brahmin, Varman is the suffix of a Kshatriya. So slowly over time, Mayura Sharman's successors had the Varman name and they became Kshatriyas. They ruled over a fairly big place. The emblem, their royal crest was the lion. There are many temples of the Kadamba times, but unfortunately, many of them have been added to in later times. So yeah,
okay. So the inscription that you were talking about, the one from the next slide, right? Was that from the Kadamba time or was it written after the Kadamba time?
Good question. It was from the Kadamba time. It was by one of the successors of Mayura Sharma. Very much, I think the 4th or 5th in descent from Mayura Sharma, who actually had that inscription incised. It's in a place called Talagunda in Shimoga district, Karnataka.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Can I exit from the session?
Yes, sure.
We have
Somebody else
another
had a question. Yes, we'll take another 2 or 3 max and then we'll end the session.
Akka, I have a doubt.
Yes, please.
Akka, where do you read about this Vedic books? Like, can you recommend us some books, or where can we read it more about it? Like,
but what are these Vedic books that you are talking about? I don't understand.
yeah, like
the Vedas themselves, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So translations of some parts of the Vedas are available. There are some stotras, there are some verses that are in praise of deities. Various other aspects of everyday life are also given in the Vedas. Translations are available. And if you look up history books, you can find a chapter on the Vedic times. You can also read that and understand what they did in those eras.
Okay, Akka, thank you. But Akka, where can we find this translations? You
can search on the net. It will give you the names of books. Again, offhand, I can't tell you the name of any one particular book. There are translations of portions of the Vedas that are available.
Okay, Akka, thank you.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am?
Akka, is there any other god related to the classical dance other than Nataraja?
Is there any other what?
Akka, is there any other god related to classical dance other than Nataraja?
See, mainly we have, as far as culture is concerned, I can tell you, it is Shiva dancing as Shiva's aspect as Nataraja. You also have Ganesha dancing, you have Parvati dancing in many temples as sculptures. Is that your question? Or I don't exactly follow what you're saying.
We call that Nataraja as a dancing Shiva, no?
Yes, correct.
Like that, there are any other gods dancing?
Yeah, Ganesha, Nirta Ganapati, very famous. Krishna dancing, famous. You even in a temple in Warangal, the 1,000-pillar temple in Warangal, you have Narsumma dancing. You can see Surya dancing. Many deities dance. Saraswati dancing in the Hoysala temples. Various deities in
Krishna.
sculpture. Yes.
Lord Krishna.
Yes, Krishna. Kalinga Natana Krishna.
Is there the dancing god temples are situated in Chennai?
Dancing god temples, no. Where you have temples where there are sculptures of gods dancing, mainly it's Nataraja.
Akka, from the previous session, we had received a question about how to pursue archaeology as a career option.
So the first thing is, if you want to pursue archaeology as a profession, intense amount of interest should be there. Otherwise, it won't see you through. You have to be very passionate about what you're studying. You really must love the subject. And then many years of toil. So after 4 years of engineering, you become an engineer and you get a job. Here, no, it's not like that. So it's 3 years of BA, 2 years of MA, and then many years of research before you get your PhD. And where are the job opportunities? Very few can join the Archaeological Survey of India. Not everybody can join. And lecturers, you can become a teacher. There are that many posts only. I'm a freelancer. You can become a freelancer like me, but it's a lot of hard work for many years before you can give a lecture like this to lovely young students. The job opportunities are pretty limited for archaeologists. I have to tell you that. It's a great subject. It's an interesting subject. We do need more youngsters in this field in India. There is an option. In the sense, you can go on to study some other subject. You can do that as well. And then take this up as a passion. Side by side, you can study it. Or after you finish studying and get a job, you can study this also. Very, very possible. You can develop a keen interest in any one branch, like epigraphy, that's the study of inscriptions, or numismatics, that's the study of coins, or temple architecture, field archaeology, whatever. There are many branches in archaeology. you can develop an interest in that, and you can have it as a side profession. I know of many people who have had other professions, in professionals in other spheres, and taken to the study of coins or inscriptions, etc., for sheer passion. And they've done so well that their books are being consulted by professional archaeologists. That is an option. That is a viable option. Okay.
Akka?
Yeah.
Akka, do you think that gods were aliens?
I really don't know enough to answer that question. All I know is like temple architecture and inscriptions, etc. That's all I know.
Ma'am, did the Brihadishwara temple really survive 6 earthquakes without damage?
The Brihadishwara temple is slightly damaged. Yes. See, this part is damaged. No doubt.
Akka, another question.
Yeah.
Did the Brihadishwara temple really survive 6 earthquakes without being damaged?
I don't know about 6 earthquakes, and nor is Tamil Nadu a place that is very, very prone to earthquakes. If at all, they are very mild. But then it's 1,000+ years since this temple was built, and we don't know how many ground tremors there have been since then. So you see, it's not only the Brihadishwara temple. There are temples and temples across India which have survived quakes. And the reason for it is the method of building. So Tamil Nadu is pretty safe, is a pretty safe zone as far as earthquakes are concerned compared to other parts of India. So why just the Brihadishwara temple? We can look at every other temple in India in the same perspective. Yeah. So maybe just have another one question and wind up, please.
Namaste, Akka.
Namaste.
Hi, I'm Karun, Akka. I have a question about the Kailash temple, Akka.
Yeah, sure.
It's also a monolithic temple, Akka. So was it built by the Pallavas or any influence about them?
Okay, so the Kailash temple that you are referring to is the one in Ellora, right?
Yes, Akka.
So that's a monolith, meaning the whole thing is made of one piece of stone. And that one was, we can't use the word built because building is putting one stone upon the other. That one was carved. It was excavated out of a hillside. And that belongs to a dynasty called the Rashtrakutas, who ruled in that area.
Yes, Akka, but would there be any influence of the Pallava sculptures? Or...
Likely, we can't exclude that because you see, the architecture and sculpture in one part of India had influenced other parts also. There is no doubt about it. For example, the sculptures and architecture of the Chalukyas definitely impacted the Pallavas. To a certain extent, maybe vice versa. The Pandyas and the Pallavas and the Pandyas. So much interlinking, interconnections are there. So I can't tell you that it wasn't there. Very likely that it was there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, can I squeeze in one last question?
Sure, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, you had mentioned that some temple where there was a Grantha inscription, right? So when it comes to scripts, I mean, we have the Grantham, we have the Devanagari, and I think Tamil script is probably called Sangam script, if I'm not mistaken. Is Grantham like the parent script of both, and is that how often do we actually see that in temple inscriptions?
Okay, so we have the Grantha script. We have Tamil as such. We don't call it Sangam Tamil. So in the previous session, I had mentioned that this script called Brahmi, which we see in the inscriptions, the edicts of Ashoka, also in Tamil Nadu, is one of the is the mother script of India. From Brahmi came Tamil. From Brahmi came the Devanagari script over the evolution of many centuries. Grantha is separate. That is a script that we see mainly in Tamil Nadu from the 7th century AD onwards. It is popularly called Pallava Grantha because the Pallavas used it extensively. Grantha was mainly used for writing Sanskrita. The Pandyas also used Grantha simultaneously with the Pallavas. Later, Chola, Vijayanagara, all of them used the Grantha script. You can even see it in faraway Cambodia. But Grantha, I repeat, is mainly for writing Sanskritam only.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, welcome.
Could
Done?
could I ask other participants to please email Akka their questions?
Yes, please. I will definitely answer you. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks so much for your time, ma'am.
not at all. With great pleasure. Thank you all for joining this session. And once again, a huge thanks to Tattwaloka and to Shreya and to Rama for all their technical support. Yes, please.
Ma'am, I have a question, ma'am.
Okay, I'll take your question. That will be the final one. Tell me.
Do we have any Buddha temple in India?
Yes, the caves of Ajanta that I showed you. You mean temples that... Can't hear you. Tell me. You said something. Yeah, there are many Buddhist temples in India. Very many Buddhist temples. Sure, there are. Ancient ones, modern ones also. They are there. Okay?
Okay.
Right. So, thank you all very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.